They say love is a mirror. But what if that mirror is cracked, and instead of seeing the other person clearly, you're only staring at fragments of your own hidden self? Think about it. How many times have you been triggered by someone close to you, a partner, a friend, maybe even a coworker? They do something small, and suddenly it feels huge. Anger rises, judgment sharpens, or maybe you just shut down. But here's the twist. Often, it's not really about them. It's about the parts of yourself you've buried, the pieces you'd rather not face. Carl Jung called this the shadow. And in relationships, the shadow doesn't just whisper in the background. It takes the stage, wearing the mask of projection. We think we're reacting to them, but in truth, we're wrestling with our own unseen wounds. Have you noticed how the qualities you can't stand in someone else are often the ones you secretly carry? The partner who feels too controlling, the friend who seems too needy, the coworker who's too arrogant. Why do these traits sting so much? Maybe because they echo something inside you, something you've denied, repressed, or judged. Let's be honest. It's easier to point the finger outward than to turn the gaze inward. Projection is the mind's clever way of saying, "That's not me, that's you." But the cost is high. We start living in distorted relationships, reacting to shadows rather than real people. And here's where it gets even more mysterious. Projection doesn't only show up in conflict, it shows up in attraction too. That spark you feel when someone seems magnetic, larger than life, almost otherworldly, that can also be your shadow at play. You're not just drawn to them, you're drawn to the parts of yourself you've forgotten to claim. So let me ask you this. How many of your relationships are shaped not by who the other person truly is, but by the unspoken dialogue between your shadow and theirs? Imagine every argument, every heartbreak, every irresistible pull or unbearable tension. What if much of it is the shadow trying to reveal itself? What if your triggers, your obsessions, even your disappointments are not curses but invitations? On this journey, we're going to move from projection to awareness. You'll see how the shadow sneaks into your relationships, how it distorts the way you see others, and how, with honesty and courage, you can reclaim the power hidden inside those projections. Because here's the truth Jung hinted at. The qualities you most resist in others, and the ones you most idolize, are doorways. They're showing you who you are, not who they are. Stay with me until the end, because the last insight is the one Jung considered the most dangerous and the most liberating. Let's pause for a moment. Before we dive deeper into how the shadow shapes your relationships, we need to understand what the shadow really is and why it matters so much today. Carl Jung described the shadow as everything within us that we've pushed away, rejected, or hidden from awareness. It's not just about bad traits. The shadow also carries emotions, desires, instincts, and even talents that didn't feel safe or acceptable when we were growing up. So we buried them. We told ourselves, "That's not me." But the unconscious doesn't delete what we deny. It keeps those parts alive, waiting for the right moment to surface. Here's the paradox. The more we deny the shadow, the stronger it becomes. Picture yourself trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can press it down for a while, but eventually, it pops back up, often with force, and usually when you least expect it. That's how the shadow works. It sneaks into arguments, it slips into dreams, and most of all, it shows up in the way we relate to people. Why does this matter so much right now? Look around. We live in a culture of performance and presentation. On social media, we show only the best version of ourselves, polished, curated, positive vibes only. At work, we're pressured to appear confident and competent, always in control. Even in close relationships, many of us wear masks, hiding the messy or vulnerable parts of who we really are. But here's the price. What gets repressed doesn't vanish, it leaks out. The frustration you swallow at work may explode at home. The jealousy you deny can twist into silent resentment. The sadness you cover with forced smiles may harden into numbness. And in relationships, these hidden forces create cycles of misunderstanding, blame, and distance. Think of the question many people ask themselves: why do I always end up with people like this? That repeating pattern, the same kind of partner, the same conflict, the the same heartbreak, is often the shadow at work. It keeps replaying the old story until you finally face what's underneath. This is why shadow work isn't just an abstract psychological idea. It's a survival skill for modern life. It helps us see the hidden patterns, the blind spots, the projections that quietly run the show. Without awareness, we're like actors stuck in a play we didn't write, reciting lines we never chose. But with shadow work, the script changes. You start to notice your triggers as signals instead of curses. You realize that the trait you despise in your partner might be pointing to something unresolved in yourself. You recognize that the attraction you feel might not be about them at all, but about a part of you longing to come alive. And here's the beauty. Facing the shadow isn't about shame or punishment. It's about integration. When you bring light to the hidden parts, you don't just reduce conflict, you expand your being. You reclaim energy that was locked away. You rediscover creativity, courage, empathy, and strength that were buried with those rejected pieces. In a world full of noise and distraction, shadow work reconnects you with something real. It slows you down, it asks for honesty. And in relationships, it changes everything. Instead of projecting your wounds, you start seeing others as they are. Instead of running from discomfort, you begin asking what it's trying to teach you. So here's the question to carry with you. Will you keep letting the shadows shape your relationships from the dark, or will you turn the light on and step into awareness? Because the moment you choose awareness, everything begins to shift. Let me share a story. In ancient Greece, there was a myth about Narcissus. You've probably heard it, the young man so captivated by his reflection in the water that he couldn't look away. But here's the part we often overlook. Narcissus wasn't truly in love with himself. He was in love with an image, a projection, something that looked real but wasn't. The reflection had no depth, no warmth, no life of its own. Now think about how often our relationships resemble that pool of water. We don't see the other person as they are. We see our projections, the qualities we admire, the flaws we despise, the stories we've carried since childhood. We fall in love with the reflection. We fight with the reflection. Sometimes, we even lose ourselves staring at an image that doesn't tell the whole truth. This is what Jung meant when he said projection is one of the most dangerous forms of relating. It blinds us. It makes us think we know someone, when in reality, we're staring at our own shadow reflected back. Let's ground this in a modern example. Imagine Sarah, a 35-year-old professional. She's confident at work, admired by her peers. But in her romantic life, she keeps falling for men who seem charismatic and powerful. At first, she's drawn to their energy. She feels alive, almost intoxicated in their presence. But over time, the same pattern unfolds. These men turn out to be controlling, dismissive, emotionally unavailable. Sarah walks away heartbroken, asking, "Why do I keep attracting the same kind of person?" What she doesn't realize is that the qualities she sees in them, authority, confidence, boldness, are parts of herself she has disowned. Growing up, she was told to be polite, modest, never too much. So she buried her fire, her assertive voice. But that energy didn't disappear. It resurfaced through projection, showing up in the very people she was irresistibly drawn to. The painful irony? While she admired their boldness, she also hated their arrogance. Both the attraction and the resentment were mirrors of her shadow. Until Sarah recognizes this, she will continue to repeat the cycle. Do you see the pattern? Projection cuts both ways. It's not only about what we criticize in others, it's also about what we idolize. Whether we're triggered or enchanted, the intensity usually signals something deeper. The shadow is at play. So, does this mean you can't trust your feelings in relationships? Not exactly. Feelings are real. Attraction is real. Conflict is real. But the meaning behind them is layered. When you feel a strong reaction, positive or negative, it's worth asking, is this really about them or is it about me? Think of relationships as theaters. The people around us are actors, yes, but the stage, the script, and the lighting often come from our unconscious. Without awareness, we keep casting others into roles they never auditioned for. One becomes the villain, another, the savior, someone else, the critic, but they're just people. The roles belong to our shadow, and yet, there's hope. Because once you realize you're projecting, you can pause. You can take back your script. Instead of accusing, you can reflect. Instead of worshiping, you can integrate. Remember Narcissus? He lost himself because he couldn't look past the reflection. But you have the chance to see deeper. To notice the person in front of you as they truly are, while also meeting the reflection as a messenger from your unconscious. So here's the real question. Are you willing to use your relationships as mirrors, not to obsess over the image, but to discover what lies beneath? That's where awareness begins. How do you actually know when the shadow is shaping your relationships? It's one thing to talk about projection as a concept, but another to catch it in the moment. Let's look at 3 of the most common signs. First, overreactions that don't match the situation. You've probably experienced this before. Someone makes a small comment, and suddenly you feel a rush of anger, hurt, or defensiveness that seems way out of proportion. On the surface, it looks irrational. Why get so upset over something so minor? Because when your reaction is bigger than the situation calls for, that's the shadow knocking. Imagine, your partner criticizes how you load the dishwasher. You explode not because of the dishes, but because their words touched a hidden wound. Maybe deep down you've carried a belief that you're never appreciated, never good enough. The shadow holds those wounds, and they spill out the moment someone presses the button, often without realizing it. Second, repeating relationship patterns. Do you notice how the same story seems to play out again and again, just with different characters? Maybe you always feel abandoned. Maybe you keep attracting partners who want to control you. Maybe you keep ending up as the caretaker. That's not random. It's the shadow replaying unresolved dynamics until you finally face them. Think of it like a loop. The unconscious keeps drawing you into familiar situations, not to punish you but to demand recognition. Until you see what's happening inside you, the pattern won't break. Take Michael, for example. He's in his 40s and keeps dating women who criticize him. Each time, he swears it will be different. Yet months later, the same story unfolds. His shadow carries an old belief from childhood. I'm never enough. That belief keeps attracting situations that confirm it. His partners aren't the real problem. His unexamined shadow island? Third, intense attraction or aversion. We tend to think of the shadow only in negative terms, but it shows up in what dazzles us too. Have you ever met someone and felt magnetically drawn to them, even though you barely know them? Or on the flip side, felt an instant dislike without a clear reason? That intensity often signals projection. The person becomes a screen for your unconscious. You project disowned qualities onto them, either golden traits you've buried or darker traits you refuse to see. The attraction, or the aversion, feels overwhelming because you're really reacting to your own shadow energy reflected back. Take Anna. She's quiet, careful, and avoids conflict. When she meets someone bold and outspoken, she feels 2 things at once: admiration and irritation. Part of her wants to be like them. Another part judges them as too much. Both reactions come from the same shadow, her own unclaimed assertiveness. These 3 signs, overreactions, repeating patterns, and extreme attraction or aversion, are the fingerprints of the shadow. The more you recognize them, the more you can pause, reflect, and step out of automatic projection. Awareness doesn't kill the shadow, but it integrates it, and that's where healing begins. We've already seen how overreactions, repeating patterns, and strong attractions or aversions reveal the shadow at work. But the story doesn't end there. The shadow also shows itself in quieter, subtler ways that can be just as disruptive in relationships if left unseen. Let's look at 3 more signs. Blaming others for what you deny in yourself. Projection often takes the shape of blame. You might catch yourself saying, "They're so selfish," or "she's too controlling." Sometimes those observations are fair, but other times, the sharpness of your judgment reveals more about you than about them. Take Jessica. She often accuses her partner of being irresponsible with money, but if she looks closely, she'll see that she also avoids dealing with her own spending habits. By calling out his flaws, she diverts attention from her own discomfort. That's the shadow at work, hiding what she doesn't want to face. idealizing or putting someone on a pedestal. The shadow doesn't just hide in criticism, it also hides in admiration. Have you ever placed someone so high above you that they seemed flawless? Maybe a partner, a mentor, or even a celebrity. That idealization feels intoxicating at first, but it creates imbalance. No one can live up to the image. Why does this happen? Because we're projecting what Jung called the golden shadow, the positive traits we've repressed: creativity, confidence, sensuality, leadership. Instead of claiming them, we assign them to others and bow to the image. Think of Daniel. He worships his new girlfriend, describing her as radiant and magnetic. But what he doesn't realize is that he's projecting his own suppressed passion and charisma onto her. When the honeymoon glow fades, disappointment sets in. Not because she changed, but because the projection dissolved. Feeling misunderstood again and again. Do you often feel like people just don't get you? While sometimes true, if it's a constant theme, it often points to the shadow. Here's why. When you repress parts of yourself, you unconsciously hide them from others. You show only the acceptable mask, then wonder why no one sees the real you. Take Maria. She's known as the nice one in every group. She avoids conflict, always smiles, always helps. Yet deep down she feels unseen and taken for granted. Why? Because she's hiding her assertiveness, her anger, her boundaries, all shadow qualities. Since she doesn't express them, others can't respond to her fully. The result is frustration and loneliness. These three signs: blame, idolization, and chronic misunderstanding all point to one truth. The shadow is shaping the story behind the scenes. If you don't recognize it, the cycle continues. But the moment you notice, you begin to break the spell. And the more you break the spell, the more freedom you create for yourself and for the people around you. So far, we've uncovered 6 ways the shadow shows itself in relationships through overreactions, repeating patterns, powerful attractions, blame, idolization, and the sense of being misunderstood. But there are even deeper layers. These hidden signs don't always shout, they whisper. And if you're not listening, they can quietly shape your entire relational world. Self-sabotage in intimacy. You finally meet someone who seems genuinely good for you. They're kind, consistent, emotionally available. Yet instead of leaning in, you pull back. You start doubting them, criticizing them, or shutting down emotionally. On the surface, you tell yourself, it's just not the right fit. But underneath, the shadow is stirring. Why? Because intimacy threatens to expose the parts of yourself you've kept hidden. The closer someone gets, the more likely they'll see your flaws, your fears, your raw humanity. So the shadow defends itself by sabotaging closeness. It whispers, push them away before they see too much. Overcompensating with masks. Sometimes the shadow doesn't pull away, it performs. You wear masks to cover what you've repressed. Maybe you become the funny one, hiding sadness, or the competent one, hiding vulnerability, or the caretaker, hiding your own needs. These masks once protected you, but they also prevent real intimacy. People respond to the role, not to the real you. And deep down, you know it. That's why wearing masks often leads to exhaustion and resentment. You wonder, why doesn't anyone see the real me? But the truth is, you're not letting them. Silent resentment and withholding. Not all shadow signs are dramatic. Some are quiet, like the ways you pull back affection, attention, or presence when you feel hurt. You don't speak up. You don't set boundaries. You hold the pain inside, and it hardens into resentment. The shadow thrives in silence. What isn't expressed doesn't disappear, it festers. Over time, this hidden buildup erodes relationships more than any fight could. Couples don't always fall apart because of explosions. Sometimes, they drift apart because of all the words that were never spoken. These deeper signs, sabotage, masks, and silence, are some of the most dangerous forms of shadow influence because they operate underground. You might not even realize you're doing them until the relationship is already strained. But once you see them, you can shift. You can risk honesty instead of sabotage. You can drop the mask and show your real self. You can speak your truth instead of letting silence rot the bond. The shadow doesn't dissolve when ignored. It dissolves when brought into the light. We've uncovered 9 ways the shadow influences relationships, from obvious triggers to hidden patterns. Now comes the most important step, turning awareness into practice. Insight alone isn't enough. Without action, awareness fades. But when you ground it in exercises and journaling, transformation begins to take root. Think of journaling as a flashlight. It shines into the corners of the unconscious where projection hides. Writing slows down the racing mind, giving the shadow less space to disguise itself. Let's walk through some practices designed to bring clarity. The trigger journal. Each time you feel an intense reaction, anger, jealousy, hurt, irritation, write it down. Note 3 things. What happened? Just the facts. How you reacted. Notice the physical and emotional surge, what it reminded you of. Ask yourself, when have I felt this before? Over time, you'll see patterns. Maybe your anger at a partner's lateness connects to old wounds of abandonment. Maybe your irritation at a friend's bragging links to your own unclaimed desire to be seen. Projection reversal. Choose someone who stirs strong feelings in you, positive or negative. Write 3 qualities you see in them. Then, flip the mirror. Ask, where do I carry this quality, even in small ways? Where do I deny it? If you wrote, they're selfish, look for moments when you protect your time or needs. It may feel selfish, but it's actually a boundary. If you wrote, they're confident, recall times you've shown confidence but quickly dismissed it. This reversal reveals the shadow behind your judgments or admiration. The mask inventory. List the roles you often play in relationships: the helper, the peacekeeper, the achiever, the entertainer. For each role, ask, what am I hiding when I wear this mask? This can sting. The helper might be hiding resentment. The peacekeeper might be hiding anger. The achiever might be hiding fear of failure. The mask protected you once, but growth requires seeing what lies beneath. Silent resentment release. Write a letter you'll never send to someone you resent. Pour out the unspoken words, the hurts, the disappointments, the unmet needs. Don't edit yourself. Let the shadow speak freely. When you're done, read it aloud privately. Feel what shifts in your body. Then dispose of it safely, burn it, shred it, delete it. This isn't about confrontation. It's about release. Golden shadow integration. Think of someone you deeply admire. Write down the qualities that move you. Now imagine those same qualities living within you, waiting to be reclaimed. Write 1 step to embody each. I admire her confidence might lead you to speak up once in today's meeting. I admire his creativity might push you to spend 20 minutes sketching tonight. Step by step, you reclaim what you've projected. These exercises may look simple, but they carry weight. Journaling isn't about the words on the page, it's about the awareness you bring to the act. Each time you write, you build a bridge between your unconscious and your waking mind. Over time, this practice changes how you move in relationships. Instead of reacting blindly, you pause. Instead of blaming, you reflect. Instead of hiding, you reveal. And little by little, you discover something profound. The shadow is not an enemy. It's a guide. A tough teacher, yes, but one holding the keys to your growth. Keep a journal close. Use these exercises as doorways. And remember, every trigger, every projection, every mask is not a curse, but a map pointing you back to the parts of yourself you're ready to reclaim. If there's one place where the shadow loves to appear, it's in love. Romantic relationships act like magnifying glasses. They bring out our brightest potentials and our deepest wounds at the same time. That's why love can feel so intoxicating and so terrifying. It's never just about 2 people. It's also about 2 shadows meeting in the dark. Think about the early stage of romance. You meet someone new, and the energy is electric. They seem perfect, almost magical. You feel alive in ways you haven't in years. That's projection at its most seductive. You're not only seeing them, you're seeing your golden shadow reflected back, the creativity, the passion, the confidence, the tenderness you've left unclaimed. But time passes, and the glow begins to fade. The quirks you once adored start to irritate you. The boldness you admired now feels like arrogance. The tenderness you cherished now feels like clinginess. The shadow shifts its mask, and the same projection that once idealized now begins to criticize. This cycle isn't a mistake. It's the shadow's way of showing you what's unresolved in yourself. Love stirs both longing and fear. It touches your deepest vulnerability, the fear of rejection, abandonment, or not being enough. And when those fears are triggered, the shadow rises to protect you, often by projecting the pain onto your partner. Take Mark and Lily. At first, Mark adored Lily's independence. He loved how she had her own life and passions. But months later, that same independence started to hurt. He accused her of being distant and unavailable. His shadow, carrying wounds of childhood abandonment, twisted her independence into a threat. His reaction wasn't really about Lily, it was about his unhealed past. Lily had her own shadow. She loved Mark's attentiveness at first. His constant texts and desire to be close made her feel valued. But soon she felt suffocated. She began labeling him as needy. What she didn't realize was that her shadow held a fear of vulnerability. Mark's closeness triggered her own discomfort with depending on someone, her fear of losing control. Do you see the pattern? Their love was real, but filtered through projections. Until they recognized that, the cycle of attraction and irritation kept repeating. So how do you navigate this? The key is awareness. Instead of blaming your partner for every trigger, pause and ask, what is this reaction teaching me about myself? Instead of assuming attraction means the other person holds the missing piece, ask, what quality am I drawn to that I can cultivate in me? There are simple but powerful steps. Speak from ownership. Say, when this happened, I felt ____, and I think it connects to something in me, instead of, you always make me feel ____. Pause before reacting. Strong emotions are signals. They invite you to look inward before striking outward. Celebrate the mirror. Even when you're triggered, see it as a gift, a chance to reclaim a hidden part of yourself. Love was never meant to be constant harmony. It was meant to be a crucible, a container where both shadows can rise and be seen. Jung suggested that true intimacy begins when two people stop projecting and start relating consciously. Shadow to shadow, light to light. It isn't easy. It takes patience, humility, and courage. But when both partners commit to it, love becomes more than romance. It becomes transformation. Two people, not only shaping each other, but discovering themselves along the way. So the next time your partner irritates you, dazzles you, or scares you with their closeness, pause and ask, what is my shadow showing me right now? That one question can turn conflict into growth and attraction into awakening. The shadow doesn't just shape our closest relationships. It also shows up in the spaces where we spend most of our waking hours at work, among friends, and in social groups. These environments can be some of the richest mirrors for the unconscious, precisely because they challenge our masks and expose the roles we play. The workplace as a stage. Work isn't just about tasks, deadlines, and promotions. It's about power, recognition, competition, and collaboration, all fertile ground for the shadow. Maybe you've had a boss who intimidated you, even when they weren't directly threatening. That fear may have less to do with them and more to do with your own disowned authority. Or maybe you've had a coworker whose arrogance drove you crazy. Ask yourself, am I only reacting to them, or is part of me angry because I wish I had that same boldness? Workplace projections often hide in the qualities we admire or resent in colleagues. Someone's confidence might trigger your insecurity. Someone's creativity might stir your jealousy. But what you're really seeing is your shadow reflected back in a professional setting. The mask of identity. At work, many of us wear masks. The reliable one, the hard worker, the quiet observer. These roles help us survive, but they can also suppress important parts of ourselves. Over time, the gap between the mask and the real self grows heavy. Take Alex. He prides himself on being dependable. He stays late, takes on extra tasks, and never says no. On the outside, he looks like the perfect employee, but underneath lives resentment and exhaustion. His shadow carries a fear of rejection, the belief that if he says no, he'll be unloved or discarded. So he overcompensates, sacrificing his well-being. Recognizing the shadow doesn't mean Alex should stop being reliable. It means he must face the fear driving his overwork and reclaim the right to set boundaries without shame. Friendships and comparison. The shadow also hides in friendships, often in the form of comparison. Have you ever felt jealous when a friend succeeded, or secretly relieved when they failed? These reactions reveal your shadow. Think of Maya. She scrolls through her friends' Instagram posts and feels small with each photo. On the surface, she says she's tired of fake social media. But deeper down, her shadow whispers, "You've abandoned your own dreams. That's why their success stings." Jealousy in friendships is rarely about the friend. It's about the parts of yourself you've left behind. When you see someone living boldly, it may be your shadow reminding you of the passions you've buried. Masks in social spaces. Beyond work and friendships, the shadow plays a role in society at large. Social gatherings, communities, even online spaces become theaters for collective masks. We laugh, smile, and perform often while hiding loneliness, anger, or fear. The shadow thrives in these hidden spaces. Have you ever left a party feeling drained, even though you were on the whole night? That exhaustion often comes from playing a role instead of showing up as yourself. The shadow reminds you that behind the performance are real emotions waiting to be seen, bringing awareness to daily life. So how do you work with the shadow in these environments? Pause before judging. When a coworker annoys you, ask, "What about them reflects something I struggle with?" Name the mask. Write down the identity you play at work or in groups. Then ask, "What part of me gets hidden when I wear this?" Transform jealousy. When envy arises, don't shame yourself. Use it as a compass. What desire in me is being awakened by their success? Work and social life may not feel as intimate as romance, but they're just as revealing. Every colleague, every friend, every group dynamic is an invitation to see your shadow in action. And when you bring awareness there, not only do your relationships improve, your sense of authenticity deepens. Because the truth is, the shadow doesn't just live at home. It lives wherever you do. And when you face it in work and social spaces, you bring freedom into every part of your life. Shadow work isn't limited to love, work, or friendships. It also stretches into spirituality. And here's the tricky part. Spirituality can be one of the most subtle hiding places for the shadow because it often wears a mask of purity or wisdom. This is where we run into spiritual traps, what Jung referred to as spiritual bypassing. What is spiritual bypassing? It happens when we use spiritual practices, beliefs, or language to avoid facing the shadow. Instead of dealing with anger, grief, jealousy, or fear, we cover them with mantras, rituals, or positive vibes only. On the outside, it looks enlightened, but inside, it's avoidance. Imagine someone saying, "I don't get angry, I've transcended that." It sounds evolved, but look closer, and you'll see that anger hasn't disappeared, it's been buried. And while hidden, it quietly shapes their relationships in destructive ways. The mask of constant positivity. One of the most common traps is believing that being spiritual means being happy all the time. Smiling through pain, denying conflict, pretending nothing bothers you. While positivity has its place, forced positivity silences the shadow. Think of Rachel. She's known as the light in every room. She avoids negativity, insists on uplifting conversations, and dismisses her own sadness as weakness. People admire her optimism, but deep down she feels hollow. Why? Because her shadow-carrying grief, loneliness, and unspoken anger has been locked away. Her light has become a mask, escaping into practices. Meditation, prayer, yoga, rituals, all of these can be powerful tools, but they can also become escapes if used to avoid real emotional work. Someone may meditate for hours but never confront resentment in their marriage. Or they might attend endless workshops while avoiding a simple but difficult conversation with their family. The shadow doesn't dissolve through rituals alone. It requires honesty. It requires discomfort. Without that, spiritual practice becomes another hiding place, the trap of superiority. Another subtle danger is using spirituality to feel above it all. Some people adopt an air of superiority, claiming they've transcended the struggles of ordinary life. But this stance often hides insecurity and unprocessed pain. The shadow twists spiritual identity into arrogance. Think of David. When his partner expresses emotional needs, he dismisses her with, "You're too attached to ego, you should rise above it." On the surface, he sounds wise, but in reality, he's avoiding his own fear of intimacy. By labeling her needs as low vibration, he sidesteps his shadow and pushes her away. The cost of bypassing. These traps may look harmless, but the consequences are real. When you bypass the shadow, it doesn't disappear. It waits. It seeps into your relationships, your work, even your health. What you avoid will eventually demand your attention, often in disruptive ways. A different path. True spirituality isn't about escaping the shadow. It's about integrating it. It's about holding both light and dark, joy and grief, love and anger. Jung called this the sacred union of opposites. So what does this look like in practice? Allow your full range of emotions. Meditation isn't about erasing feelings, but noticing them without judgment. Bring honesty into rituals. Instead of using them to escape, let them reflect. What is this silence showing me about myself? Stay humble. Everyone wrestles with their shadow. True growth comes not from superiority, but from compassion. Spiritual bypassing is seductive because it promises peace without pain, but real peace comes only through integration. The shadow isn't the enemy of spirituality, it's the missing half. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "I'm above that," pause. Ask instead, what part of me am I afraid to face? Because in that question lies the doorway to a spirituality that's not just light, but whole. So far, we've explored how the shadow shapes your personal life, your love, your work, your friendships, even your spirituality. But Jung's vision went further. He believed the shadow wasn't only personal, it was also collective. Entire groups, cultures, and even nations carry shadows of their own. The collective shadow. Just as individuals repress unwanted traits, societies do the same. A culture may deny its greed, its prejudice, or its aggression. It pushes those truths underground and projects them onto outsiders. This is the collective shadow. Everything a group refuses to own about itself, but still acts out unconsciously. Think about history. Humanity's darkest chapters, wars, persecution, systemic injustice, were fueled by collective shadow. Groups projected their fears and desires onto the other, labeling them as evil, dangerous, inferior. Violence followed, not from conscious choice, but from unconscious denial. How it looks today. This isn't just about the past. You can see the collective shadow everywhere. Online spaces often become projection arenas, full of outrage and blame. Political divisions deepen, as each side projects its own denied traits onto the other. Even within families or workplaces, collective shadows form. We're the good ones, they're the problem. Social media magnifies this dynamic. Algorithms reward outrage, feeding projection loops. We scroll, react, and divide, often without noticing that what enrages us in others may be our own shadow playing out on a cultural stage. Jung's warning. Jung lived through 2 world wars. He saw firsthand how denial and projection on a collective level could erupt into destruction. His warning was simple. If we don't face our collective shadow, it will control us. But he also believed in possibility. Just as individuals grow by integrating the shadow, societies grow by acknowledging their darker truths. Healing begins when we stop blaming the other and take responsibility for what lives in us all. What this means for you. You can't heal society alone, but you can begin with awareness in your own circles. Notice group judgments. When your family, community, or workplace labels another group harshly, pause and ask, what are we avoiding in ourselves by projecting onto them? Watch your online reactions. When a headline sparks fury, ask, is this only about them, or does it touch something in me? Practice empathy. The collective shadow thrives on dehumanization. The moment you humanize the other, projection loses power, from personal to collective. Here's the deeper truth. The work you do on your personal shadow ripples outward. Each time you own your anger instead of projecting it, you reduce the collective anger in the world. Each time you reclaim your golden qualities instead of idolizing others, you strengthen the whole. Jung suggested that humanity's future depends not only on systems or leaders, but on individuals doing their inner work. When enough people integrate their shadows, the collective shadow loses its hold. The gift of awareness. Facing the collective shadow isn't easy. It asks us to confront greed, prejudice, and violence, not just out there, but within. But it carries a gift. When we face it together, we create the chance for collective transformation. Think of it this way. Just as in relationships, triggers are invitations, so too are conflicts in society. They ask us, what part of ourselves are we refusing to see? The shadow, whether personal or collective, always points toward integration. Jung's philosophy was never about perfection, it was about wholeness. To be whole means to hold both light and dark, personal truth and collective responsibility. And so, the question remains, will we keep projecting our shadow onto each other, repeating history's darkest cycles, or will we have the courage to face it together and step into a new story? We've traveled a long path together from projection to awareness, from personal triggers to the collective shadow. Along the way, we've seen how the hidden parts of ourselves shape love, work, friendships, spirituality, and even society. So now comes the real question. What will you do with this awareness? The journey revisited. You've learned that when you overreact, it's often the shadow speaking. When you repeat painful patterns, it's the shadow looking for recognition. When you feel strong attraction or sudden dislike, it's the shadow reflecting disowned qualities. You've seen how blame, idolization, masks, sabotage, and silence all carry the fingerprints of the unconscious. And you've discovered tools, journaling, reflection, honest communication that bring light where the shadow hides. Most of all, you've realized that relationships aren't just about the other person, they're also about you. Every trigger, every enchantment, every disappointment is an invitation to turn inward, reclaim what you've lost, and integrate what you've denied. The power of integration. Integration doesn't mean becoming perfect. It doesn't mean you'll never project again. It means noticing more quickly, owning what belongs to you, and choosing growth over blame. It means bringing honesty to love, authenticity to work, humility to spirituality, and compassion to society. When you face your shadow, you don't just free yourself. You also free the people around you from carrying the weight of your projections. You open space for authentic connection relationships built on truth, not illusion. A final reflection. Pause here. Think of one person in your life who stirs strong feelings, love, irritation, envy, or awe. What if your reaction to them is less about who they are, and more about the part of yourself waiting to be reclaimed? That one question, simple, direct, and unsettling, can change everything. The next step. This is where the work really begins. Don't let these ideas fade. Pick up your journal, write down your triggers, your projections, your masks. Use your relationships as mirrors, not weapons. Remember, the shadow is not your enemy, it's your guide. And if this journey resonates with you, don't walk it alone. Stay connected, keep exploring, keep turning toward the parts of yourself you've left in the dark, because the path from projection to awareness isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, unfolding again and again, as long as you have the courage to keep looking inward. Closing words. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's the essence of shadow work. Not escaping into light, but bringing light into the very places we fear to look. So the next time your shadow appears in love, in conflict, in jealousy, or even in awe, don't turn away. Lean in. Ask what it's trying to show you, because behind every projection lies a piece of your wholeness, waiting to return. And if you stay on this path, you'll notice your relationships, your work, your spirituality, even your place in the world begin to shift. Not because others have changed, but because you have. This is your invitation. This is your moment. Step into awareness, step into wholeness, and let the shadow become your teacher.